I bought my 2017 Acura NSX. I did a few videos on it, and a lot of you in the comments mentioned that you thought I should have just gotten an Audi R8 instead. Well, I've been driving this first generation R8 V8 with a 6-speed manual for the last 8 days, so I'm going to try to answer the question of, should I have bought this car? You can pick these up for anywhere between $60,000 to $80,000 nowadays, so it's not a direct competitor to the NC1 NSX, but in a lot of ways, this accomplishes a lot of the same things. It's the everyday drivable supercar. That's how many journalists reviewed this back in the day when it was released in 2007, and that's also how a lot of reviewers view the 2017 NSX. And one of the biggest reasons I bought it is because it's an everyday drivable, comfortable, livable supercar. When it comes to a supercar, whether you go with something daily drivable or something more hardcore, there's no denying the fact that you want to be seen in that car, even if it's just a little bit. And when it comes to the Audi R8, I mean, this car has a lot of road presence. Even though it's one of the more common supercars out there, it has a truly timeless design. And if you ask me, between the first gen and second gen R8, hands down, the first gen is the one I prefer in terms of the styling. This is probably a 20-year-old design at this point. It still has so much road presence and it looks fresh. And I think compared to the NC1, as of right now, this is the more timeless looking supercar. The NC1 still has design elements, especially the front end, that could be argued to be overstyled. What do you think looks better between the R8 and the NC1?
I like the shape of the R8 better than the NC1, to be honest. The front of the NC1 doesn't do it any favors.
But another thing I really like about the R8 is the interior. Compared to the 10-year newer NC1 NSX, I prefer the interior of this R8. It just has a more timeless design, just like the exterior. It has physical buttons for everything, and it doesn't look like it's out of a much cheaper product. The problem with the NC1 interior is that the buttons, the switchgear, I mean, literally the window switches are straight out of a Acura MDX, which itself is basically just a Honda Pilot. In the Audi R8, I mean, I don't know if some of the switchgear is shared with lower end models. It very well might be, but at least your base starting point is still Audi. It's still a luxury product. I'm not saying this interior is perfect. For example, this steering wheel, the diameter is a little bit too big and the rim is a little bit too thin, but at least we have these very tactile buttons and the all-important cup holder test. The NC1 has the clip-in cup holder that doesn't really work well for taller cups. This R8 has a more fixed cup holder design. I mean, it's not perfect, but we did do a couple boba runs in it. I think it does a better job, at least, than the NC1 in that regard, because at least they're fixed. They don't intrude into the passenger legroom, but still not very tall boba cup friendly.
They're too shallow.
But at least you get this middle one, which is kind of better for smaller cups. But the problem is, if you have a cup that's not perfectly sized to fit in one of these cup holders, you're basically going to have to hold it while you're driving. Which I
basically had to do in our last two
multiple times. The third thing I really appreciate about this R8 is, of course, the driving dynamics. This is a much more analog, raw car than the NC1. As you can see, we have this gated 6-speed manual. It makes you work for the performance. This is powered by a 4.2 liter V8, no turbos, no hybrid assistance, 8250 RPM redline. So you really have to wind this engine out to get the performance out of it. And it's only 420 horsepower, which in a 3,600 pound car means this is not anywhere near the performance level of modern, even entry-level sports cars. I would say the performance of this is much closer to a Lotus Emira. But that's part of the joy. You get the amazing sound of this naturally aspirated V8. It reminds me a lot of the Ferrari flat plane crank V8s, like the 360 and the F430. It has a much more exotic sound from inside and out compared to the NC1's V6 Turbo. And even though this is nowhere near as quick in a straight line, just the fact that you do have to wind it out and kind of savor the experience does make it in a lot of ways more enjoyable. I already did a canyon drive review of this R8. The video should already be on the channel, so if you want to see my thoughts about how this really performs dynamically outside of just the engine and the gearbox, go check that video out. Overall, it's not without its flaws, but if I'm being perfectly honest, if you want that analog, raw driving experience, this gives you a good amount without sacrificing too much of the daily drivability. And the fourth and maybe most important thing I like about the R8 is the current value for money. Like I said in the beginning, $60,000 to $80,000 gets you a really clean example. In fact, I saw one posted last week on Facebook for $68,000. It was also like a 2008 or 2009 model year, first gen V8 manual. It had maybe 30 or 40,000 miles, so not too bad. So much road presence, so much character for that amount of money. And I think the prices of these are still relatively low because they made so many of them. I think close to 46,000 was the final production number through all model years from 2007 all the way up to 2023 or 24. But if you're not someone who's chasing 0 to 60 or quarter mile times, this gives you a fantastic driving experience and tons of road presence and tons of daily drivability. It's comfortable, it's refined. For about $70,000, I can't think of a better all-around supercar. But now it's time to talk about the things I don't like so much.
Can I add a bonus like?
Yeah.
Can we give a shout out to visor mirrors for the passenger side?
Yeah, my NC1 does not have visor mirrors, which is crazy to me. Even my NA1 NSX has a visor mirror, and it's a 36-year-old car.
Yeah, that was an interesting design choice when I decided to do my makeup on the way to Monterey Car Week.
Oh yeah.
I was so surprised to find out there was no mirror.
Right. I mean, it's crazy that Acura, of all brands, very interesting how they prioritize and deprioritize certain features in that car. But anyways, on to the dislikes. Number one, and this is a small dislike, but you know, because this is marketed as an everyday supercar, and because if you're buying a first gen R8 nowadays, you are going to be a more price conscious buyer, right? Otherwise you'd be spending $200,000-$300,000 like it's nothing. But the fact that this gets really bad fuel economy, I think 14 to 15 miles per gallon is roughly what I've been averaging over the last week, and that's been driving mostly quite conservatively. I drove this to San Francisco and back in some stop and go traffic, as you can see right now, and a lot of freeway driving. Under 15 miles per gallon, premium gas. Gas prices here in California are, you know, close to $6 still for premium. Thankfully, this does have a very large fuel tank, 23.8 gallons, which is way bigger than the, I think, 16 gallons of my NC1. So you still get well over 300 miles on a tank. I mean, we're just barely over half a tank right now, and it still says I have 210 miles. So you can expect, you know, 350 plus miles driving normally, but the fuel cost is astronomical. I think the first time I filled up, I still had at least 3/4 of a tank, and I spent like $95 on gas. So if you really do want to drive this every single day, just make sure you budget for the fuel consumption. Now, the second thing I think could be better in the R8, actually I won't even say it could be better, it's just part of the design of this car. It's a compromise. Because you get the gated manual, because you have this naturally aspirated engine that has really sharp throttle response, I mean, all of those things add to the driving experience when you're trying to enjoy this on a back road or maybe even on a racetrack. The compromise of those engineering decisions, it's hard to drive this in a relaxed manner on the street. You can't rush it into each gear. You have to be intentional, you have to take your time, which is fine, but the flywheel doesn't let you do that. If you see right here, I mean, I'm shifting almost as quickly as I can, but the flywheel still causes the RPMs to drop so quickly that by the time I clutch back out in the next higher gear, it's too low. And so you get a little bit of jerkiness when you shift. Let me try to demonstrate that again. Watch the tach here. See, it drops 200 to 300 RPM too low. Unless you really shift it quickly, like right here. See, that one was fine, but I basically had to manhandle the shifter into third gear. So when you're driving around in traffic, I mean, not that a manual is ideal in traffic, but the clutch feel of this car is so good. That's not the issue. It's just that super light flywheel made it to this high effort gated manual. And I do sometimes wish I was in my NC1 just cruising along in full EV mode. Also, this particular car is modified with some unknown brand of coilovers. They're not particularly high-end. The damping isn't great. On a smooth road like this, it's fine. But point being, I think ride comfort for this specific example could be better, but I'm sure if it had stock suspension, it would ride great. This also has an aftermarket exhaust, which does have quite a bit of drone, as you can probably hear on camera. My wife actually commented on her preference for the sound of this engine over the NC1. The NC1 definitely does not sound exotic until you really start revving it out, and even then it just sounds like a really nice sounding V6, which is not typically what you'd expect of a supercar. Another thing that I think hinders the daily drivability of the first gen R8 specifically is obviously going to be the outdated tech. This does have built-in navigation, but it's super primitive, as you can see, typical tech from, you know, the late 2000s. Of course, you could pony up for a newer R8 that has, you know, your Apple CarPlay, your Android Auto and whatnot, but then you're spending NC1 money or even more, and getting, in my opinion, what is the worst looking generation of R8. This also doesn't really have any driving assists besides normal cruise control. It does have a backup cam, which is super low res and not good in low light. And the parking sensors are super sensitive to the point of almost being distracting. If you're even like 2 feet away from something while trying to park, it'll just beep at you incessantly. And this car's tech has actually shown me how far we've come when it comes to basic things like a backup cam, navigation, parking sensors. I can't fault this car for those things because this is par for the course for that time period. But I'm just calling out the fact that if you do try to daily drive a first gen R8, you might want to upgrade some of the tech in the aftermarket. The NC1's tech isn't great by 2025 standards either, but at least it's a significant step up from this. And the fourth and final thing, I think, is a slight drawback to the R8. I mean, this part is very subjective. This might actually be a good thing, depending on what you want from your supercar, but the fact that they made almost 46,000 R8s means that this is one of the most, if not the most common supercar out on the road. Compare that to the NC1's less than 3,000, and this is something like 13 to 14 times as common. Does that make it any worse of a car? Absolutely not. But like I mentioned, if you are buying a supercar, you do want to feel like you're in something a bit more special. And so the relative lack of rarity does make this a slightly less special experience. At least when I see one on the road, I always give it respect, but it's not a neck breaker, if that makes sense. Not that a supercar has to be, but I really like spotting rare cars out on the road. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, in the almost 10 years that the NC1 has been out, I've seen maybe only 2 out in the wild, not at a car show or a track or anything like that. Again, that could be a pro or con depending on who you are. And the nice part about that is that due to the high production volume, these cars are still relatively affordable. So to answer the final question of, do I think I should have saved roughly $50,000 and gotten an R8 V8 manual instead of my NC1? For my purposes, the answer is no. And I think this brings up a broader topic that I want to address, which is I see a lot of comments in my comment section on the NC1 videos saying, wow, man, if I were to spend 6 figures on a supercar, I would absolutely not get something like the NC1 because I would want it to be more raw, or more engaging to drive with a manual and so forth. I think it's important to recognize the context here because I review cars, 3, 4, sometimes 10 cars in any given filming session. So I get to drive a lot of really exciting cars, not only on the street or in the canyons, but also at the track. I go to track days this year, I think at least once a month. In my last outing at Thunder Hill, I think I drove like 4 or 5 cars that all weighed under 2,800 pounds. Super light, super raw. I get my fix on a weekly basis. So I'm not exactly someone who's looking for the most raw, visceral, engaging supercar to have in my own garage. A lot of times I just want to chill. I just want something that has the performance when I want to tap into it, but in all other situations I can just drive it like a normal car. And that's where the NC1 shines above basically everything else in that price range. I know there are some exceptions to that, like the C8 E-Ray, which I haven't gotten a chance to review yet. So if you are in California and you have one, please let me know. That would be such a great comparison topic. For this specific spot in my garage, I wanted something that was easier to drive. And so no, I do not think I would have been happier with a first gen R8. That doesn't take away anything from this as a car. I think if I didn't have the opportunity to review so many cars as part of my YouTube channel, I actually would prefer this R8 because it is more of an occasion when I drive it. It does make me work harder for the performance, and that is enjoyable. I'm not just a car enthusiast, but also a driving enthusiast. But I just wanted to share that point to make it clear of like what my priorities are when I was in the market for an entry-level supercar. Also, just worth pointing out that one of the reasons this car is not right for me is that my NA1 NSX, I think some of you forgot that I still have it, or maybe I didn't really mention that point in my NC1 reveal videos, but yes, I still have my 91 NSX. This car has a lot of overlap with the NA1. It's an analog entry-level supercar I enjoy driving on special occasions, and this R8 would serve virtually the exact same purpose. So no point having two cars that do the same thing. So that being said, a big shout out to the owner, Yue, for letting me daily drive this first gen R8 for the last 7 days. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Is this the best value supercar for $70,000 or maybe even under $100,000? What are your thoughts on my choice on the NC1? I'm still really happy with it, but I'm open to changing my mind. If you have a C8 E-Ray or anything else that'd be worth comparing to this, I'm looking for as many opportunities to see if I should have gotten something else. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.